criticisms of the search process in academic medicine, to be sure, but in broader communities beyond our own, is you can identify what you want, but there's a disconnect between your stated needs, your stated leadership needs, and those skill sets and competencies, and what you get out of the process. And the way it's often articulated for our community is that the dean comes in and charges the search committee with a set of parameters for leadership, and then the committee weighs the weight of the CV. And so I'm interested in how you all bake in those competencies into the search process. And if I can start specifically, Ron, with you, because you've taken this kind of assessment and I've actually gone to a formalized assessment instrument, if I understand correctly, right?
That's correct. We use that in the recruitment process. After the first round of interviews, if people have been selected for that next round, we will use this instrument. It's called Assess. And I think we have an example of some of it also that gives us a quick profile. Now, this
isn't you.
This is not meant to characterize the person entirely. It's used for the behavioral questioning that we use. And the instrument will take the results of this, and you can see that there's basically three areas there: thinking, working, relating, and then other. And you're really just using this instrument to identify someone that looks like they're significantly an outlier, and then the instrument suggests what probing behavioral questions might one ask, like give me an example of where you failed. Give me an example of a program that you are very proud that you achieved, a conflict with another person and how you resolve that, etc. I'm talking like a psychiatrist now.
You're doing great as a psychiatrist.
But that's the instrument that we use in the interview process to try to assess the talents and then reveal more about them in the behavioral interviewing.
Peter, how about you? How do you bake that into the search process?
Well, first of all, I think this sounds terrific, and I wish we were doing it, and maybe we will. So we don't do that, but also what we don't do is what some committees do is provide. You mentioned either the weight or the substance of the CV. What some committees do is assign numerical values and try to really get a weighting to the number of pages beyond that, and to try and weight out leadership aspects. That's very hard to do, I think. I think the leadership components don't jump out of a resume. They do a little bit better, I think, out of an executive bio sketch than they do out of a formal academic resume. So we don't try to do numerical, and that's important. Less so in our state, but in another state where you have sunshine laws, where that could actually come back to bite you. You've got to be careful about that. So we don't do that. What we do is ask some of the questions that you mentioned, Ron, that tap into leadership aspects in terms of conflict management, in terms of negotiation, in terms of then other things, as whether somebody has actually run a strategic planning process, develop something de novo that's beyond developing a lab or developing a research project, but really more complex leadership activities that of themselves are pointers that this person has skills and has attributes and is a leader. So we go with it in a less formal way and try to do that at the beginning of the interview.
For your institution, how do you bake in the leadership competencies that you have identified in the process you described earlier into the search process?
I think for a small number of jobs, there may be specific competency-based tests, if you will. But I think we rely very much on questions, interactions, a substantial number of interviews, but developing questions that focus on the core competencies. We are also an institution that tries to be very values-based, and NeoUCOM's 5 core C values are competence, communication, caring, character, and community. And so we try and assess all candidates on those dimensions as well. I will tell you, I do my own reference checks for people that are going to report to me, and I spend a tremendous amount of time on those reference checks because the best indicator of future performance is often past performance. And I usually try and insist on having a meal with a finalist candidate or asking one member of my executive team to have a meal. I just think there is a different dynamic that happens that within our environment is actually critical.
Bill, I wanted to come back to one issue when we were talking about assessing for leadership. In terms of competencies and in terms of being specific, I think the dean's charge is very important, even though it may get a cursory look, but it's really meant to define what's different, what Nora's looking for compared to what Ron's looking for and compared to what we're looking for. And so the more specific that can be, and the more the search committee members themselves can appreciate that, even down to the level of doing the assessment of candidates against core aspects of the dean's charge, I think that's very important, and it moves you away from simply back to looking physically at the CV. And then also another thing that's very helpful and important with that is that you're able to have a dialogue with a search firm, if you're using a search firm, and go beyond saying we're really looking for somebody who's clinically strong, who's good at research, and who's good at education. That's not terribly helpful. And so if you can articulate specifics and a vision for the role and the candidate, then the leadership attributes begin to kind of come into shape, and that really helps the search firm as well, because they're busy people and they really want to know what sets apart your position compared to Nora's or Ron's again.
I would also say, Bill, that relative to going off list and reverse visits, I've done that on occasion, especially if there were some concern or question about the person's interpersonal relationships. And so I have, it was a finalist, and a little surprised at first that we wanted to come to his hospital and talk to the persons whom he supervised and who supervised him. But did so and found it very helpful, very useful. We use that specifically with surgeons, encouraging our chair of surgery to go to the institution, scrub in, and as much as technical competence is important, watching the interpersonal interactions and relationships that go on as the surgeon comes into the arena. And one more thing is that we have a little 5x7 pad that almost everyone in the organization has access to, that if someone's interviewing and they're particularly gregarious and friendly and engaging, or not so, perhaps rude to a secretary or someone whom they're not trying to impress, then they can submit that form about that individual. We had a circumstance a couple of years ago where a person interviewed exceptionally well leading up, but our driver, who was driving her back to the airport, came back, and our organization's flat enough, went right to our CEO and said, "That was the rudest person that I've ever interacted with." Well, that sort of took care of her candidacy because of that development.